In 1950, Life magazine published this photograph that was really just meant to be a simple, awe-inspiring display of American military might.
Right, a total spectacle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a sequence of images capturing the Trinity atomic bomb explosion, the terrifying, world-altering brainchild of J. Robert Oppenheimer and his massive apparatus of scientists at Los Alamos.
Yeah.
And to the general public, it was just a picture of a fiery, expanding hemisphere over the New Mexico desert. A spectacle to be feared, sure, and admired. But to a British physicist named Geoffrey Taylor, who was sitting thousands of miles away in Cambridge with just a magnifying glass and a really profound understanding of fluid dynamics, it was something else entirely.
It was a raw, unencrypted data set.
Yes.
See, the United States military establishment was operating under this fundamental, honestly, almost arrogant misunderstanding of how information actually works in the physical world.
How so?
Well, they had classified the yield of that explosion, the exact kiloton destructive power of the bomb. They treated it as one of the most closely guarded secrets on the planet. And they genuinely believed that by simply redacting the final number from their press reports, the secret was completely safe.
But they messed up the censorship.
They made a critical error. They published a time-lapse scale right alongside the photos to show the progression of the blast. So Taylor, he didn't just look at the fire, he looked at the mechanics of the expansion.
Right, the actual physics of it?
Exactly. He measured the radius of the fireball in that single public magazine clipping, and he cross-referenced it with the millisecond timestamps.
And he used something called dimensional analysis, correct? This wasn't just some ballpark guess.
Oh, far from it. Dimensional analysis is this method where you deduce the relationship between different physical quantities by tracking their base dimensions. So like mass, length, and time.
Yeah.
Taylor knew that the radius of a blast wave depends primarily on the energy released, the time since the detonation, and the density of the surrounding air.
So he just built the equation from those public variables.
Yeah. By manipulating those variables, he constructed it perfectly. He took the radius to the fifth power, divided it by the time squared, factored in the atmospheric density of the New Mexico desert, and just solved for the energy.
Wow.
From a magazine photo, he mathematically calculated the exact top secret yield of the atomic bomb.
That is insane.
And by publishing his findings, he effectively exposed the highly classified ratios of power between the United States and Russian nuclear arsenals. He proved that the data is always there, hiding in plain sight, if you understand the underlying laws governing the system.
If a physicist in a tweed jacket can reverse engineer the most heavily guarded military secret in human history from a piece of glossy paper, we really have to ask ourselves, what possible excuse do we have for blind guessing in business?
None at all.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are speaking directly to you, the listener, today, because we are stepping into an arena that demands rigorous, unapologetic, analytical thinking.
It really does.
Our mission today is to tear down the Silicon Valley mysticism around growth hacking. We've been analyzing the actual playbooks used by veteran operators who have engineered growth at a massive global scale.
Or real mechanics.
Right, specifically the intense frameworks laid out by early growth pioneers like Alex Schultz.
Yeah.
We are exposing the brutal physical laws of internet marketing. Okay, let's unpack this. Growth hacking is just internet marketing, isn't it?
That's the core truth that everyone tries to ignore. We live in this ecosystem where the concept of growth has been deeply romanticized. It's been wrapped in this mythology of the lone genius hacker who magically finds a hidden line of code to just explode a user base overnight.
The silver bullet myth.
Exactly. But the source material we are examining today, delivered by someone who actually engineered user acquisition for billions of people, completely incinerates that mythology. It replaces the magic with mechanics.
And the hype with physics.
Yes. Absolute unforgiving physics. If you want to understand how platforms actually scale from a dorm room to global ubiquity, you have to abandon the search for silver bullets and accept the reality of terminal metrics.
Let's start with the messenger himself, because his background perfectly sets the tone for this whole analytical teardown.
It really does.
The source introduces a speaker who literally began his academic career studying physics at Cambridge before transitioning to what he jokingly calls the dark side of the force.
Internet marketing.
Yeah, internet marketing. And he didn't start in a polished mahogany venture capital boardroom either.
No, he started by trying to pay for his university tuition.
Right, exploiting a 20% margin affiliate program in the early days of the web.
Yeah.
He was basically arbitraging clicks for holiday sites.
Because he was broke. He looked at the internet not as some creative playground for brand building, but as a rigid system of inputs and outputs. And his definition of growth hacking is brutally, aggressively simple.
Utilizing any available channel.
Any quantitative lever you can pull, whether that's SEO, email, SMS, push notifications, whatever, to force a mathematically desired outcome.
I think that background in physics is not just, biographical trivia.
Oh, it's the foundation of everything.
It's the epistemological foundation of everything he teaches about scaling a business. Because a physicist looks at a chaotic universe and seeks the underlying immutable laws that govern behavior.
Exactly. And when applied to internet marketing, that means looking straight past the superficial vanity metrics. You have to ignore the raw signups, the PR mentions, or the momentary viral spikes.
All the stuff that founders love to tweet about.
Right, the dopamine hits. You have to ignore that and identify the gravitational forces that actually dictate the survival or death of a product.
And, according to the source, the absolute most critical metric, the physical law of growth that you cannot violate under any circumstances, is retention.
Retention is everything. If you don't have retention, you have nothing.
I want to visualize this for you without getting bogged down in textbook definitions, because if you're listening to this, you already know what a cohort graph looks like.
Sure.
You know that you acquire a batch of users on day 0, and as the days tick by, that cohort shrinks. People leave. Attrition is a natural law of any product.
But the survival metric here, the literal life or death visual on that graph, is the asymptote.
Break that down.
That is the only part of the graph that matters. An asymptote, in this context, is the point where that downward sloping curve of active users finally flattens out into a horizontal line parallel to the x-axis.
It means the bleeding has stopped.
Precisely. A specific percentage of the people who tried your product have integrated it into their lives and are sticking around permanently.
And if it doesn't flatten out?
If that curve never flattens out, if it just continues to slope downward until it eventually intersects the x-axis at 0%, your business is a walking corpse, no matter how viral it currently appears.
I usually hear this described as a leaky bucket. You pump water in, it leaks out the bottom.
Yeah.
But honestly, I hate that analogy.
It's a bit passive.
It's way too passive.
Yeah.
I look at retention mechanics more like orbital physics, specifically escape velocity. You are building a rocket. Your marketing, your viral loops, your PR, all of that is the thrust.
Right.
You can burn millions of dollars in fuel to blast that rocket into the sky, and for a brief moment, the press will write articles about how high you're flying. But churn is gravity.
That's a great way to put it.
If your retention curve doesn't asymptote, it means you never reached orbit. And when the marketing fuel runs out, gravity takes over, and your massive user base comes crashing back down to 0. You just burn up in the atmosphere.
That orbital analogy is far more accurate because it highlights the required energy expenditure. Pumping marketing dollars into a product that hasn't reached an asymptote is literally burning capital to fight gravity you can't beat.
It's just a waste.
It doesn't matter if your app is the #1 downloaded application in the App Store today. If your retention curve eventually hits 0, the math dictates that your product will die. You are just waiting for the calendar to catch up with the physics.
So I have to challenge this, or at least play devil's advocate for the industry.
Go for it.
If this math is so fundamental and the terminal velocity is so easily predictable, why do so many companies armed with brilliant engineers and seasoned founders become completely obsessed with the water pouring in? Why do they obsess over the thrust, the acquisition, rather than fixing the aerodynamic failure of their retention?
Dopamine and ego.
Really? Just human nature.
Mostly, yeah. Acquisition is highly visible and incredibly exciting. When 1,000 new users sign up on a Tuesday afternoon, it feels like undeniable validation. It triggers a neurochemical reward for the founder.
The chart goes up and to the right.
Exactly. Fixing retention, however, is grueling, invisible psychological labor. It requires looking squarely at the people who actively rejected your product and painstakingly figuring out why your vision failed them.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
It is much easier for a founder to stand at the front door, shaking hands with new arrivals, than to analyze the exodus sprinting out the back door. But ignoring the back door is intellectual cowardice.
Which leads us to a specific question. The source material absolutely eviscerates. Founders are constantly asking, what does good retention look like? Is 20% good? Is 5% enough?
Asking that question implies you haven't done the fundamental math of your own ecosystem. It's the equivalent of asking Jeffrey Taylor to just guess the yield of the Trinity test without doing the dimensional analysis.
Just throwing darts at a board.
Right. The source demands that you calculate your required retention yourself, using publicly available data and basic logic. You have to reverse engineer your survival. What's fascinating here is that the raw data is everywhere if you are willing to think critically.
Let's actually run that math, because this is where the theory becomes violently practical.
Let's do it.
The speaker in our source material looked at the internet population at that specific time. It was roughly 2.4 billion people. And he subtracts the population of China because major Western platforms like Facebook were largely banned there. Now he has the absolute ceiling of human beings on Earth who could theoretically access his platform.
The total addressable market.
Exactly. Now let's apply this framework to the listener's reality, because most of our audience isn't trying to capture 2.4 billion global citizens. Let's say you run a B2B SaaS company selling practice management software to dental offices in the American Midwest.
Okay, that scales down perfectly. If you are selling to Midwest dental clinics, your absolute physical ceiling, your TAM, is perhaps 15,000 clinics. That is your 2.4 billion.
Okay, 15,000.
Now, assume your marketing is absolutely flawless and you somehow acquire every single one of them to try your software. If your retention rate is only 5%, that means 14,250 of those clinics will churn out.
They just leave and never come back.
All right. And you will be left with exactly 750 permanent customers.
And if your business model requires 2,000 active subscriptions just to pay for your server costs and your engineering payroll, then a 5% retention rate isn't just suboptimal.
No, it is a mathematically guaranteed death sentence. You will literally run out of dentists to sell to before you reach profitability.
The raw data to figure this out is everywhere, isn't it? Industry registries, census data, market reports.
It is all public. The limitation is rarely a lack of data. It is a lack of willingness to apply rigorous, cold logic to your own optimistic revenue projections. You have to define the threshold of survival before you spend a single dollar on acquisition.
It's the difference between hoping for success and engineering for survival.
Absolutely.
And that transition from hoping to engineering it requires a massive structural shift in how a company is built. The source introduces a rule here that I guarantee will make a lot of venture-backed founders uncomfortable.
The growth team mandate?
Yes. The rule is, startups should not have a growth team.
It sounds so counterintuitive.
It does. I've seen companies with VP of growth titles raise hundreds of millions of dollars. Are you suggesting that structural model is fundamentally flawed? I mean, if growth is the ultimate arbiter of survival, why on earth would you not dedicate a specialized elite SEAL team whose only job is to drive metrics?
Because compartmentalization is the enemy of systemic survival in an early-stage company.
How so?
Think about it. When you create a segregated growth team, you are implicitly signaling to the rest of the organization, the product engineers, the core designers, the customer support staff, that user acquisition and retention are not their problems.
So you create a silo.
You create a massive silo. The product team starts building features based on aesthetic purity or engineering complexity, completely divorced from market reality.
Because they don't have to worry about whether anyone actually uses it.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the growth team is relegated to the basement, trying to invent marketing hacks to force users into a product that wasn't designed to retain them in the first place.
You end up with a Frankenstein product. The builders build for themselves, and the marketers are just slapping duct tape on the orbital rocket trying to keep it together.
Precisely the danger. The source argues that the product itself must be the engine for growth. Therefore, the entire company is the growth team.
The whole company.
Yes. The CEO cannot outsource this to a newly hired VP of marketing. The CEO must be the head of growth. To delegate this responsibility to a silo is to abdicate the survival of the company.
Every single decision has to run through that filter.
Every single feature request, every engineering sprint must be subjected to a relentless filter. How does this specific line of code bend the retention asymptote upward?
Which means the CEO's ultimate duty isn't just general management or fundraising, it's defining the target. They have to set a single, unifying North Star metric for the entire organization to rally behind.
Without a North Star, you just have chaos.
The source cites Mark Zuckerberg in the early days of Facebook as the apex example of this total alignment.
And his focus was absolute. Facebook didn't have a fragmented strategy where one team cared about time on site and another cared about ad clicks.
Yeah.
They looked at their cohort data, the people who stayed versus the people who abandoned the platform, and they isolated the fundamental difference. They discovered their North Star, getting a new user to connect with 7 friends within their first 10 days.
That specific metric, 7 friends in 10 days, is fascinating because it wasn't a guess. It wasn't a marketing slogan.
No, it was the mathematical tipping point. If a user hit that threshold, their retention asymptote locked in at an incredibly high percentage. They became a permanent resident of the ecosystem.
But if they only found 3 friends?
They eventually churned. The data was crystal clear.
Once leadership identified that North Star, it dictated the entire architecture of the platform, didn't it?
Completely. They didn't just suggest that users find friends, they engineered the onboarding flow to force it. In those early days, if you didn't have 7 friends, you didn't see a newsfeed, you didn't see photos.
The platform was basically broken until you hit the metric.
Yeah. The entire interface was weaponized to prompt you to import your contacts, search for classmates, and send friend requests. If a new feature didn't accelerate a user toward that 7 friends in 10 days metric, the feature was killed. There was zero ambiguity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the entire purpose of that North Star, whether it's 7 friends or importing a database or whatever, is to guide the user toward a very specific psychological event.
The magic moment.
Yes, the magic moment. And I want to be careful here, because magic moment sounds like a fluffy marketing buzzword.
It does sound a bit soft.
It does. But in this context, it is a highly specific neurological transaction. It is the exact microsecond. A user fundamentally understands the core value of your product.
It's the moment the cognitive friction disappears, the dopamine hits, and they realize, oh, this solves my problem.
And the singular consuming goal of the entire company is to engineer the pathways so that you connect the new user to that magic moment as violently and rapidly as possible.
Violently and rapidly. That's the key. For Facebook, the magic moment was seeing your crush's relationship status, or seeing a photo of a party you attended.
Or for Airbnb, it's the moment you walk into a beautifully curated apartment in a foreign city and realize you aren't staying in a sterile hotel.
Exactly. For an accounting sauce, it's the moment the software automatically reconciles a month of chaotic expenses in 3 seconds.
Every millimeter of friction between the user's first click and that realization of value is a threat to your survival.
You have to strip away the unnecessary tutorials, the multi-page onboarding surveys, the beautiful but confusing design elements, because if they don't hit that magic moment before their attention span expires, they bounce.
They bounce and they join the downward trajectory of your retention graph.
Yeah.
But if you connect them to that magic moment rapidly, you literally alter the physics of your retention.
This is how you push that asymptote up.
Right. You take a retention curve that was destined to flatten out at a fatal 20%, and by forcing users into the magic moment, you bend the curve so it stabilizes at a surviving 70%.
The magic moment is the gravitational pull that stops the user from floating away into the void.
Wait, so if connecting users to that magic moment is the only way to bend the retention curve, how do you actually find out what that moment is? Because if I go out and ask my most active, dedicated users, my power users, they're going to tell me about the magic moment.
No, they won't.
They've completely forgotten what it feels like to be a beginner.
Yeah.
They're just going to ask for dark mode, custom keyboard shortcuts, and advanced API integrations.
That is the most dangerous psychological blind spot in technology development, what the source identifies as the Silicon Valley echo chamber.
Expand on that.
The people building these products, the founders, the engineers, the venture capitalists, live in highly connected, tech-saturated bubbles. They are power users of absolutely everything. And so the constant whining complaint you hear in these echo chambers is, I'm getting too many notifications, I'm getting too many emails, the product is too noisy, it's too aggressive.
They want minimal, silent, Zen-like interfaces.
Because their digital lives are already overflowing with stimulation.
And the source explicitly states that listening to those complaints will kill your growth.
Right. It will destroy your growth trajectory because you, the founder, and your tech-savvy peers are not the target demographic for scaling a business. Your target is what is defined as the marginal user.
I love this concept of the marginal user. I look at this exactly like building a massive state-of-the-art gym.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you only listen to the feedback of the Olympic powerlifters who train your power users, you are going to build a terrifying facility. You'll have chalk covering every surface, 1,000-pound free weights, death metal playing over the speakers, and absolutely zero instruction.
That sounds intense.
Right. And you will completely ignore the overweight beginner, the marginal user who's intimidated just pulling into the parking lot. That beginner doesn't need a silent, Zen-like hardcore experience. They need an aggressively helpful push notification just to remind them to put on their running shoes. They need the trigger-based emails. They need the SMS reminders. They need the noise to pull them back in and scaffold their habit so they can finally reach that magic moment of actually enjoying a workout.
That structural analogy holds up perfectly under scrutiny. The power user has already internalized the habit. Their neural pathways are set. They don't need the triggers.
They already know why the gym is great.
But if you turn off the notifications to appease the vocal minority of power users, you abandon the marginal user to the void. The marginal user downloaded your app, opened it once, got slightly confused by the interface, and closed it.
They are barely engaging.
They are teetering right on the edge of never coming back. They require that scaffolding. Optimizing your product for the power user while ignoring the silent majority of marginal users is a mathematical error of the highest order. It restricts your payload and starves your virality.
Let's transition into the mechanics of that virality. Because once you understand the marginal user, you have to actually reach them. The source breaks down the anatomy of viral growth into a strict three-part mathematical equation.
It is not magic. It is an algorithm.
Payload, frequency, and conversion rate.
This is the engine of exponential growth. Step 1 is payload.
Which is what, exactly?
Payload is the raw volume of exposure. It asks the question, how many potential new users are hit with a single viral blast when an existing user takes an action on your platform?
So if a user shares a link, does it go to one person via text message, or does it go to 10,000 followers on a public feed?
Right. The larger the payload, the wider the top of your viral funnel.
Step 2 is frequency.
How often is that payload being delivered? If a user imports their contacts and sends an initial invite blast, that's a frequency of exactly 1. It happens once and it's over.
But if a user installs a widget from your software that embeds on the footer of their daily blog,
then that frequency is continuous. Every single day, a new blast goes out without the user having to lift a finger.
And step 3 is the conversion rate. Of all the people exposed to the payload, at whatever frequency it operates, what percentage of them actually click through, understand the value proposition, and convert into active users?
This is the equation. Payload multiplied by frequency multiplied by conversion rate. If you want to increase your virality, you do not sit in a conference room with a whiteboard and try to brainstorm a viral video campaign.
You look at the math.
You look at your product's core architecture and you turn the dials. Can we incentivize a larger payload? Can we automate the frequency of exposure? Can we reduce friction on the landing page to increase the conversion rate?
The canonical historical example of this equation, perfectly executed in the wild, is Hotmail.
It is the apex case study for structural virality. In the mid-90s, Hotmail was struggling to gain traction. They had backing from Draper, Fisher, Jurvetson, but traditional marketing, billboards, radio ads was too expensive and yielded terrible results.
It just didn't scale.
No. Then they engineered a subtle, almost invisible structural change. At the bottom of every single email sent by a Hotmail user, they automatically appended a simple line of text. P.S. Get your free email at Hotmail, with a hyperlink.
It seems so obvious now, but let's run that through the equation, because the mechanics are staggering.
Let's look at the payload. Every time a user sent an email, they were hitting someone new. If they hit reply all to a massive corporate thread, the payload could be 50 or 100 people at once.
And it was highly targeted because it was going to known contacts.
Yes.
And the frequency.
The frequency was relentless. It happened every single time an email was sent, multiple times a day, day after day. The brilliance was that the frequency was tied directly to the core utility of the product.
The user didn't have to go out of their way to click an invite a friend button.
Exactly. The virality was passively baked into their normal usage behavior.
And finally, the conversion rate.
The conversion rate was astronomical because the value proposition was undeniable, immediate, and free. The recipient of the email was staring at empirical proof that the product worked, delivered implicitly endorsed by someone they knew.
So Hotmail optimized payload, frequency, and conversion simultaneously.
The result was server-crashing growth. They acquired millions of users in a matter of months, completely circumventing traditional marketing channels. That is viral physics in action.
It's brilliant. It's cold, calculating, and undeniable. But reaching millions of users creates a terrifying new problem. Which brings us to the final trajectory of this deep dive. Infrastructure and execution.
Because growth isn't just about marketing tricks.
Right, because once you understand the physics of retention, once you have your North Star, and once your viral equation is humming, you have to actually sustain the weight of that growth. And the source makes it clear that scaling at a massive global level is about heavy-duty engineering.
This is where we separate the amateur growth hackers from the apex predators in the global market. The source highlights a strategic move at Facebook that fundamentally altered their trajectory, building a scalable translation infrastructure.
Most companies look at internationalization as a manual, sequential chore, don't they?
Yeah, they translate their site into French, then 6 months later they hire an agency to translate it into German, and so on. Facebook realized that manual translation was a bottleneck that would choke their growth. So they engineered a system that allowed them to attack all languages simultaneously.
Because if you're looking at that 2.4 billion total addressable market we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
you realize very quickly that the vast majority of them do not speak English. But how do they actually do it? Because hiring thousands of translators would bankrupt an early-stage company.
They crowdsourced it. They built a back-end infrastructure that allowed their own bilingual users to vote on translations for every button, prompt, and menu item on the platform. They gamified the localization process. It allowed them to localize into major languages almost instantly, and even allowed for niche localizations like Pirate English as a stress test of the system.
Pirate English. That's actually brilliant for testing.
By offloading the labor to the community, they removed the financial and temporal bottlenecks of global expansion.
It's anticipatory engineering. It's building the massive pipes before the water even arrives.
It requires what Wayne Gretzky famously called skating to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been.
Right.
The source specifically references the strategic foresight of looking toward emerging markets, citing initiatives like the Internet.org Summit in India. The analytical growth mind looks at the demographic data and realizes that the next billion users are not coming from North America or Western Europe.
Those markets are totally saturated.
The next wave of massive growth is coming from India, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
And if you want to capture that market, you cannot wait until their infrastructure looks like San Francisco's to start building for them. You must engineer your product today for the specific demographics. The lower network speeds, the cheaper Android devices, and the very data plans that will dominate tomorrow. You are building the heavy infrastructure for a future reality.
But having the vision is only half the battle. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the defining factor of survival is how you actually execute that vision.
The source leans heavily on a philosophy of execution, famously quoting General George S. Patton. A good plan, violently executed today, is better than a perfect plan tomorrow.
Violently executed.
That is a heavy, deliberate word choice for a tech lecture. Doesn't mean recklessly throwing code at a wall, right?
No, it means executing with overwhelming force, absolute commitment, and relentless speed. The academic pursuit of the perfect plan is a luxury that early-stage companies simply cannot afford.
Perfection is the enemy of velocity.
In a landscape governed by the brutal math of retention and the ticking clock of your financial runway, velocity is your primary weapon. This philosophy demystifies the nature of monumental success. We tend to look at massive tech behemoths and assume their founders possess some magical, esoteric knowledge.
We assumed they were uniquely clairvoyant or had some secret prior experience that guaranteed their victory.
We look for the genius narrative because it excuses our own failures. Well, I'm not Mark Zuckerberg, so of course I couldn't build that.
Exactly the trap.
The source completely dismantles that myth. Building a global juggernaut is rarely about being crazy smart. It is the result of facing the brutal math, working incredibly hard, and executing the plan with relentless, violent speed.
Iterative learning at a velocity that outpaces the competition.
They didn't win because they wrote a perfect business plan in a dorm room. They won because they shipped a flawed product, watched the marginal users fail, measured the retention asymptote, fixed the onboarding flow, and shipped again faster than anyone else in the market could react.
Okay, we've covered massive, dense ground here. Let's distil the core laws of this deep dive. We started by tearing down the mythology of growth hacking, replacing the magic wands and silver bullets with the cold, hard physics of internet marketing.
The inescapable math.
We established that retention is the absolute law of gravity. Your curve must asymptote, you must reach escape velocity, or you're mathematically dead.
Period.
We learned that delegating growth to a siloed team is a fatal error. The CEO must be the head of growth, setting a ruthless North Star to guide the entire company toward engineering a magic moment for the user.
As rapidly as possible.
We explore the danger of the Silicon Valley echo chamber, learning to ignore the whining of the power user and obsess over the marginal user who desperately needs the noise to build a habit. We deconstructed the virality equation into payload, frequency, and conversion, using Hotmail as the ultimate blueprint.
A perfect structural execution.
And finally, we looked at the necessity of scalable, anticipatory infrastructure and the patent doctrine of violent execution today over perfection tomorrow. So what does this all mean?
It is a dense, highly demanding framework. But it is the only framework that aligns with the reality of the market. And there is a final, lingering thought to leave you with, drawing directly from the closing words of the source material. It is a phrase that is simultaneously terrifying and profoundly empowering.
What is it?
The speaker simply states, "Growth is optional."
Growth is optional. That's chilling.
The universe does not owe your idea survival. The market does not care about your perfect plan, your elegant code, or how many hours you worked this week. It does not care about your ego.
Right.
Growth is optional, which means that failure is the default state of nature. Everything naturally decays. The retention curve naturally trends to zero.
Just gravity pulling you back down.
The choice to abandon the ego, to refuse the lazy questions, to face the brutal, uncompromising math of your own ecosystem, and to execute violently today, that choice is entirely up to you. Just as Jeffrey Taylor looked at a terrifying photograph of an atomic blast and chose not to see magic but to see physics, you must look at your product and see the mechanics of its survival.
The laws are there. The data is public. The math doesn't lie.
Whether you use it to build a juggernaut or let your rocket burn up in the atmosphere is a choice you have to make.
And as you mull that over, consider this one final thought. Something that builds on this unforgiving math, but goes even deeper into the psychology of the market. If growth is optional and failure is the default, then churn isn't just a neutral event.
It's not just someone leaving.
Exactly. When you fail to retain a marginal user, they don't just disappear back into your total addressable market. They become inoculated against your product.
Oh, that's a dangerous concept. Negative virality.
Right. You haven't just lost a user. You have actively trained a segment of your TAM to ignore your future marketing payload. You've taught them that your magic moment is a lie. So every day you operate without a flattened retention asymptote, you aren't just burning capital. You are actively salting the earth of your own potential market.
The physics of failure are just as exponential as the physics of growth.
You can choose to engineer survival, or you can engineer your own obsolescence. The clock is ticking.